Hello, everyone. Let's go around the Big Ten. I am Marc Givler. Got Chip Minnich with me here as always. A week in the Big Ten that was very interesting. We're going to recap the weekend that was. Some games maybe didn't live up to the hype. Others that maybe weren't as hyped ended up being very good. So we had some interesting results this weekend, and that'll set us up, I think, for a very interesting rivalry week here in the Big Ten coming up. So we'll have our preview show later this week, but want to talk about some of the big things that happened this weekend. The very first, obviously the game of the week in the Big Ten was Ohio State, Indiana. Indiana scared the Buckeyes in the first quarter. It was, jumped on them 7-0. There was some things that weren't going particularly well for Ohio State. Indiana kind of self-inflicted wound there on a punt, and then they drop one, and then they give up one. So really two self-inflicted wounds on the punts, but really with Caleb Downs, that was kind of a special player making a special play. But, special teams fell apart for the Hoosiers, and then Ohio State just sort of imposed their will in a 38-15 win. Chip, first of all, how surprised were you by the result, by what you saw out there? Did it go as you expected? Was it not as you expected? What were your thoughts watching that game?
Well, I have to admit, I thought it was going to be closer. I had predicted 31-24. So when the game was starting to get in a positive way for Ohio State, kind of, the fact that they were up, 31-7, and it looked like they were pretty much just, they had it well in hand, which they did. That was a surprise. If anything, the fact that I want to give credit where credit is due, Indiana obviously trying to, some kind of semblance of pride a little too late, but, scoring the touchdown, getting the 2-point conversion, going for the onside kick that wasn't successful. I understand why they were trying to do that, but I mean, let's face it, I think, and I'm sure that the Ohio State coaches and players that were on the field would deny this, but I think the defense, let's face it, I think they kind of took their foot off the gas. I think they were just kind of, all right, let's just get through this game. And Indiana, they scored, like I said, Ohio State had it well in hand. So I'm pleased with the result. I think Indiana, I think that they probably now see kind of the fact that they were 10-0, but now they can have a clear delineation in terms of where they are with regards to where Ohio State is in terms of the Big Ten power rankings.
Yeah, I'm with you. I thought it'd be a little bit closer. I had 31-21. I thought it'd be a fairly close game going into the fourth quarter. It wasn't hard to put a finger on it exactly. I think obviously Ohio State started bringing. I think the biggest thing was the Ohio State defense. They started bringing pressure after that opening drive. I think they were just get that feeling out period early in the game. They really weren't bringing pressures. Maybe Jim Knowles was hoping that he could just play vanilla before the Michigan game and get out of there. It was clear that wasn't going to work. So they started really dialing up the blitzes and the simulated pressures. And Indiana just had no answer. Curtis Rourke hasn't been hit like that all year. 5 sacks. I think they only given up like 11 sacks in the first 10 games or something. They gave up 5 on Saturday. So they had no answer for any of their A-gap blitzes. Cody Simon was kind of shooting through the A-gap like, it was like just a nothing. I mean, there was no. Then they had Jack Sawyer kind of wrap around on a twist, and he got right through the A gap. Like there was their interior, their offensive line, even more so than their tackles, who also kind of had a tough day with Sawyer and Tuimoloau. But the interior of that offensive line just, I don't know if it was communications, blitz pickups, I don't know what it was, but there were some issues there that they hadn't cropped up before on Indiana. And I think again, when you're killing everybody by 30 all year, you put yourself in a 21-7 hole, and it happens so quickly. Like you're 7-0 and things are great, and all of a sudden it's like 21-7. I think maybe that's just a position they hadn't been in before and kind of weren't able to adjust on the road on the fly like that. So, Ohio State sort of gave them the blueprint of like, okay, this is what it looks like. You want to really be a top 5 program. This is what it looks like. Some controversy at the end. Ryan Day, QB sneaks it in at the end. I have my opinion, which I've made kind of clear on Twitter. I'll reiterate though. Chip, what was your thoughts on that?
I didn't have a problem with it. I really didn't. I understand, I guess I'm of the mindset that, okay, they were trying to get Indiana to use their timeouts. I mean, I was watching the game. I have to admit, I was watching the game from home. So it's one of these things where, I give a lot of credit to Travion Henderson, because, I mean, you want to talk about, I would say the vast majority of players in that exact same position would have scored the touchdown. Now, in hindsight, if Travion Henderson knew that it was going to get punched in, maybe he would have scored the touchdown. But I really don't have a problem with it. I kind of look at it like this is one of these things where Ohio State, they were trying to just basically make sure, all right, we're going to decisively take this. I know Ryan Day is taking some flack for it, but if anything, that's just kind of, it's a little different than I think a lot of the Indiana fans are all up in arms. And I think Indiana fans are conveniently forgetting how much their team scored against their previous opponents when the game was well in hand.
Yeah. So clearly Indiana at the end of the game is trying to make the resume look as good as possible for the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that last drive was about. They tried to shorten the game and get one in at the end, make it look like it was a 2-score game. And I get that from Indiana's perspective, but I also get that from Ohio State's perspective. You didn't stop playing. You drove down and scored. You went for 2. You kicked an onside kick. Is only one team allowed to stop playing? Is only one team allowed to keep playing?
Precisely.
And Ohio State's in this, maybe not the same situation Indiana's in, but so if Indiana's allowed to do whatever they can in the last 5 minutes of that game to improve the look of that game for the committee, for their ranking, why can't Ohio State do that? Why can't Ohio State say, well, we were up 24, you cut this thing to 16. We think this was a 3-score game, not a 2-score game, so we're going to make it a 3-score game again. And when it comes down to who's getting the number 1 seed, if they beat Oregon, for example,
mm-hmm.
in a Big Ten championship game, and it's between them, Oregon, and maybe Texas or someone like that, why wouldn't you want that on your resume? So this is all's fair in terms of Division I football. This is a business.
Right. Exactly.
So I didn't have any problem with Indiana not stopping playing and, putting in their backups and doing whatever they could to just get out of there. I didn't have a problem with Ohio State stop playing. I do think your point about Travion Henderson is funny. First of all, he's a super nice kid, one of the nicest kids I've ever covered. But his niceness might have cost him there. And I'm sure if he could have that back, he would go in, if knowing that.
Oh, without a doubt.
Will Howard ended up touchdown vulturing him there on the goal line. So that was something. But I don't have a problem with it. I think Indiana fans were mostly just upset after the game that it wasn't that the game wasn't closer on the scoreboard, because now they're immediately into did we lose by too many points, or is the committee going to keep us out now because it was a 23-point game or whatever it was instead of a 50, whatever it was, 16-point game, whatever. I really think that's what the core of it was. But
sure.
Then all the SEC teams go and lose. And I think Indiana might even be in a better place today than they were this time last week after all the SEC losses. So no harm, no foul, guys. Relax.
Exactly. And one other thing that not necessarily about the final touchdown that bothered me, but kind of the national sports writers narrative of, Indiana, the special teams, 2 mistakes that cost them dearly, which it did. And trying to rationalize the fact okay, well, if they didn't, have that botched punt and they didn't have the punt return for a touchdown, it would have been a lot closer. And I'm sitting there thinking, special teams is a part of the game. Okay. You have offense, you have defense, you have special teams. I don't know where this idea of, okay, well, if this didn't happen, we're being able to kind of try to rationalize the reality is that, okay, yeah, Indiana, the 2 special teams mistakes or issues did impact them. But guess what? Ohio State, that's a compliment to Ohio State to capitalize upon that. So that's kind of where I had more of a beef with the national media narrative from some that we're trying to kind of try to make this game closer than it was, when anyone, as you said, Curtis Rourke was I think, by the end of that, he wanted no more of the Ohio State defense because he had, been having to pick himself off the turf, obviously, after those 5 sacks that you referenced.
Yeah, I thought Ohio State, after that first drive, dominated the game. I mean, it was like 70 yards on the first drive and then like 80 yards on like the next 8 drives or something ridiculous. Like it was domination after that. But, and yeah, like the Caleb, like the punt return, like that's just a special player making a special play. Look, you're going to have a hard time, I think, selling Ohio State fans on this stuff like that because Ohio State fans have watched special teams cost them over and over again over the years, the last like 7-8 years, like cost them in close games or make games more interesting than they could have been otherwise by poor special teams play. So I don't think Ohio State's feeling bad for any special teams gaffes. They've had their share of those in spades here the last, decade or so. But that's a good segue to what we want to talk about. Like, so you've watched Indiana play Ohio State now. We've seen what's happened all over the country on Saturday. It was a wild day. Does Indiana deserve to be in the playoff? Have they done enough? Let's assume they beat Purdue. Spoiler alert, we're probably going to pick them to beat Purdue on Saturday. Have they done enough to get in?
In my opinion, they have. There was a brief reference to Indiana's schedule and how easy it had been up until that point. And, we talked about that previously, the fact that, all right, they hadn't played a team the caliber of Ohio State, but giving credit where credit is due, Indiana, they beat every team up until that point that was on the schedule. And that included, I realize that they're struggling, not that I am shedding any tears over it, but Michigan, who was considered to be one of the better teams heading into the season, they beat Washington, who is a winning program. So I understand that, all right, it's not, well, I have to take that last sentence back. Okay, you can throw Nebraska in now because Nebraska has a winning program. That being said, all right, was it the most difficult schedule or as difficult a schedule as Ohio State? No. But I don't think you should be penalizing teams for the fact that they beat the teams. In Indiana's case, they beat everyone up until Saturday, everyone that was on their schedule, regardless of how good or how bad they are perceived to be.
And they dominated them. It's not like they were squeaking by. I mean, Ohio State beat Nebraska by 4. Indiana beat Nebraska by 49, I think. I mean, just so like they've blown out some teams that are competitive. And the SEC didn't handle their business on Saturday.
No, they did not. Not at all.
You can't criticize Indiana's schedule when Indiana has beaten the Oklahomas and the Auburns and the Kentuckys of the Big Ten, and the SEC schools that are so deserving haven't. You lose by 21 on the road to Oklahoma. Oklahoma is the definition of average. Oklahoma is Minnesota South. It's exactly what they are. They're Minnesota South. There's no difference, no tangible difference between Oklahoma and a Minnesota or a Nebraska or a Washington. No difference. And those teams are beating all of these super deserving SEC teams. They're losing to those types of teams. If Alabama had gone out there and smoked Oklahoma, and Texas A&M had gone out there and smoked Auburn, and Georgia hadn't looked like crap against Kentucky, and Alabama's lost to Vanderbilt, like if those things weren't happening, I could see this argument where, yes, even though Indiana has a better record, that you would put in the SEC school, but they're not doing their job. They're not making their case. They're hurting their case every week by how they perform on the field, and results matter. I'm sorry. Wins and losses are important. That's why we do this.
That's exactly it.
So, I clearly in for me, clearly in. Now, if they lose to Purdue somehow, we can have this discussion again on next Monday, but clearly in right now, barring a loss to Purdue, barring a incredibly shocking loss to Purdue. And I think Indiana will be better for this because I think they've learned this is the level we have to play at, in a playoff game, or if we want to, we want to be in this, we want to run with the big dogs. This is kind of how it looks, and this is what we have to be ready for.
Right. One of the things that I think if I was Curt Cignetti, besides kind of, as you just said, about the level of play that Indiana has to elevate their game and their program to for the college football playoff. I would also make the point that by and large, I'm not saying all, but a lot of the players that are on Indiana's roster this year are players that came over from James Madison. And that's been a boost to Curt Cignetti with the fact that, like, trying to get the program up and running with the sense that, okay, these are players that know how I operate and they know what I expect and all of that. And I'm not trying to disparage them, but I kind of took note of the fact that Urban Meyer, who was somewhat apprehensive about how's this going to go prior to the game, or at least he seemed to be. And then on the pregame show on Fox saying, watching these two teams physically, he felt that Ohio State had a definite physical advantage just looking at them. So my point being is that if I'm Curt Cignetti, not only you've seen, all right, what you need to raise your level of play into for the college football playoff, but also as we're getting ready for beyond the college football playoff, not only the transfer portal, but also the recruiting, what you need to, the type of player you need to have to be able to compete long-term beyond just the quick fix of the transfer portal that you brought in from James Madison.
Yep. Needs to keep the Caden Currys of the world at home.
Oh, well, we're happy that he didn't. So,
yeah, but look, I have a ton of respect for what they've done at Indiana this year. And I think they are firmly in the playoff right now, and will be, unless, again, they would have to really, I don't know how show bad enough to lose to Purdue right now, but that's, maybe that's something we'll talk about on Thursday.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think they're safe. Other around the Big Ten, elsewhere, Penn State. Whew, I think you and I both kind of hinted like this is a trap spot. Be careful, but neither of us had the guts to actually pick a Minnesota upset. But I think we both said like, hey, be careful with this one. And sure enough, man, and I even said special teams, the PJ Fleck special teams thing would happen, and they did. They blocked a punt, but wow, like that was dicey. And I've been critical of James Franklin over the years for his game management. I thought he managed that last possession beautifully. I thought the fake punt was great. I thought the guts to like, no, we're not going to punt this back to them with a 1-point lead and rely on our defense to, be one fluke play away from hurting our playoff standing by losing a road game to Minnesota. So are you, how do you feel about Penn State now? I guess this is like better, worse, somewhere like around the same.
I'd say worse. In the sense that, yeah, they won, but if anything, that should be, I think Penn State, let's face it, I mean, they're in, I think, barring some kind of I don't want to say a miracle, but some kind of an unforeseen loss this coming weekend. I think Penn State's in. I think they're going to have the advantage of a home playoff game in Beaver Stadium, which would be tremendous. But kind of what we were just talking about, I think Penn State, they've shown that they can get up to or relatively close to Ohio State or the top teams in the Big Ten, but they're not there. I mean, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Minnesota. Minnesota is a good, solid team. I think PJ Fleck had his team ready to go, obviously by losing by one. That kind of what you alluded to, the fact that they're special teams, the fact like the trick play that, right afterwards that put them up, so I think Minnesota, that they are trying to continue to improve their program, but Penn State, they're just not at that top level within the Big Ten.
Yeah. they just seem to, I don't know what it is. Like, I think this year, part of it is like their weapons on the outside.
Yes.
I just don't think they scare defenses enough. Like Tyler Warren's a fantastic player, one of the best players in college football, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And they have really good running backs. And quarterback play, I think, is solid. It's like, I think we've had this thing with Drew Aller, and it's like, he's not as good as like maybe his high school ranking was, and as maybe as like Penn State fans were acting he was going to be like his freshman year, but he's also not as bad as like his detractors are. Like you can win with Drew Aller. So they have a lot of people. Their defense is good. Like Abdul Carter's a difference maker. They always seem to have good play in the secondary. They don't have those difference makers. I think that's what separates them from Ohio State and Oregon this year. Historically, it's a little harder to put my finger on it. Like game management decisions, but it's not like something that's like super, super tangible. Like even like the talent levels are always generally fairly close. So I don't know, but I think with this team, I think it's going to come down to that lack of weapons that Ohio State and Oregon both have. I don't know that I feel worse about them because I think we both expected this to be a little bit closer than people thought. Now, maybe not that close, but I think we both expected Minnesota was going to give them a game. I think every team goes through this once or twice a year, no matter how good you are. Even the teams that run the table, like Ohio State had the Nebraska game. Take away obviously the Oregon game was a coin flip game against two great teams, but like Ohio State had the Nebraska game. That was awful. Like you're going to have a game or two like this. They did find a way to win. They did find a way to finish on that last drive. So I can't say I feel too much worse right now. I think Penn State is who I thought they were. I think Penn State is, a team that's going to host a first-round playoff game. I think the notion that an Ole Miss or something like that would wipe them out in Beaver Stadium in December is hilarious. And I think the people who have spewed that for a couple weeks are just massive propagandists. But I do think there is an ingredient missing for them to do what they need to do, which is essentially win 4 playoff games in a row. I just don't think they have the weapons to do that. But I do think they're going to win the first game they play.
Oh, yeah.
And then who knows? It will depend on matchups from there. If they draw Miami or something in the next round, are you really like certain they couldn't beat Miami? Like if they draw Arizona State, if they draw Boyd, like who could they draw that, now if they draw Ohio State or Oregon or even like a Texas or a Georgia, yeah, okay, maybe you're not feeling that too much, but if there's teams they could draw in the second round that they could beat.
Yes. And the reason I was smiling about Miami is I always think back to whenever Miami would wind up in the Pinstripe Bowl, for example. And again, I freely admit I'm Ohio born and bred, and I hate the cold. But to me, it's comical watching these players. Like you can tell, like they want nothing. They want nothing to do with being outside. They want nothing to do with playing football. A few weeks ago, like the idea of I can't remember the game, but maybe you do. Was
it Tennessee, Georgia?
Yeah, and they were around, and it was 55 degrees, and I'm sitting there thinking those guys are
perfect football conditions.
Exactly, they're in a world of hurt if they draw Penn State
at Notre Dame. Yeah, that's going to be all sorts of fun if that happens.
That's exactly my thought process. And I agree with you. I think Penn State, the little something that is missing is on the outside, because obviously for the last few years, Tyler Warren being the most notable, and recent, tight end play has been fine. Running back play has been fine. I agree with you about Drew Aller being, he's good enough. It's just, they don't have anyone within their wide receiver group that makes you think like, okay, well, how are we going to handle this? It's not something that I think preoccupies the minds of the opposing defensive coordinators.
Yeah, if they just had a Jahan Dotson or a KJ Hamler, or even just one guy like that on the outside, I think it would make a huge difference for this team. I really do. But
I agree with you.
I don't think they have that this year. Okay, so Nebraska, we got a couple of blue bloods getting bowl eligibility all the way at the end of November, so that's always interesting.
Yes,
but I think 2 programs are actually headed in different directions. Nebraska, USC both got their 6th win, get bowl eligible. We talked about this in the preview show last week, how important these games were really for both teams. Let's start with Nebraska. That's got to feel like a huge weight off. Like they were 5-1, right? They
yes.
Like we've been talking about like they're going to get bowl eligible. They're going to do it. We've been talking about this for like 6 weeks, like a month and a half. They've been talking about this. And like each week it felt like just the pressure like mounted as they couldn't get bowl eligible. They finally do. Again, is it perfect? No. Is it where Nebraska should be? No. Are Nebraska fans probably really happy about things right now? No. Do I think Matt Rule has the program going in the right direction? Yes, I do.
Yes. I mean, I genuinely feel a sense of relief, like you said, for Nebraska, for the coaches, for the players and the fans, just because psychologically, just to get that burden off of their collective psyche, I think, okay, now obviously you want to win the final game. You want to improve that bowl game destination. You want to continue to build upon what Matt Rule has done and it just kind of speaks volumes about, years ago, Frank Solich and Bo Pelini being fired. And now just everything that the twists and turns that program has taken, that you're rushing the field after, getting to magic number 6, when it used to be like a 9-win season wasn't good enough. So they've got to get back to where they believe that they should be and can be. But I think I am happy for Nebraska, because I think Matt Rule is slowly getting that program back to kind of what they're used to.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're on the right track. I think Matt Rule does. I think he gets it. I think, again, I think if you buy Nebraska stock right now, you are buying pretty low, and I think the stock's on the rise. That was really a dominant win. You beat Wisconsin by basically 20 points, which, by the way, that may be a Thursday talk again. Is like, boy, things are still not going well in Madison for Luke Fickell. But
no,
I think we talk about like maybe Nebraska and USC heading in different directions. I think we might be talking about two teams heading in different directions who played each other on Saturday, with Nebraska, Wisconsin. But now Wisconsin's got to beat Minnesota, who I think will be favored in that game to get bowl eligible. But big win for Matt Rule's guys. USC in a game I said Lincoln Riley absolutely had to win, or else they might be leaving him. He might be walking home from the Rose Bowl. They pull it out. I mean, goodness, that was 13-9 UCLA going into the fourth quarter. The stats actually seem to favor UCLA when you look at a lot of the numbers, but they found a way, right? I mean, that's what you need to do in a rivalry game.
Yeah, congratulations to you, because you did predict USC and I had predicted UCLA. But yeah, USC, let's face it, kind of the return on investment in Lincoln Riley. If you're a USC booster or contributor to the program, you have to be thinking, okay, we just finally got to 6 wins. So they know that they're going to a bowl game, but they know also, all right, Notre Dame's coming to town. Notre Dame's going to be rightfully favored. So you're looking at 6-6 and kind of, and I stand by what I said prior to the UCLA game, is that I think the UCLA program, in terms of, just kind of the momentum, even with the loss to USC, I think Deshaun Foster has that program headed in the right direction. And I don't think you can really say the same thing about USC.
No, if I were a USC fan, I'm not sure I'm feeling any better about things today than I was on Friday, before the game. You might feel worse. That was ugly. That was not like,
no, it was,
yeah. Like, I like what Deshaun Foster's doing in recruiting, and like UCLA's playing better the second half of the season than the first half of the season, but like UCLA's 4-7 now. Like they're, this is not a great team. And it looked so ugly. You had to grind it out in the fourth quarter and come back and win. Like nothing, I don't think anything that happened on Saturday is making anyone feel any better about Lincoln Riley. I really don't. I think we're going to find out a lot on Saturday, because if Notre Dame blasts them, which I am actually expecting at this point, we'll see. Maybe I'll change my opinion between now and the preview show. But like, if Notre Dame houses them this weekend, that is going to be such, I don't care who they play in the Who Gives a Crap Bowl at 6-6. That is going to be such a long off season for Lincoln Riley if Notre Dame just blasts them. I think they have to win that one to have any semblance of like good vibes heading into the offseason. I
kind of characterize, okay, USC. I'm going to throw Maryland. I'm going to throw, like, obviously, I mean, like Wisconsin, you allude, I mean, there are so many programs that are either on the cusp of bowl eligibility, or in the case of, USC, they have to figure out what they are doing, offensively, defensively. Like in Wisconsin's case, it certainly was more of a self-inflicted decision by Luke Fickell that he's paying the consequences of, and his program is paying the consequences of. But as far as like USC and Maryland, I truly believe it has to be a concerted effort on the transfer portal and recruiting and strength and development, because both of those programs, I mean, when it came to Maryland, the way that they lost to Iowa, I think generally speaking, it's one of these things where, okay, what it takes to win in this league consistently. And I don't know how rapidly they can do it, but if anything, that's what they need to do to be able to be competitive within the Big Ten.
The predicament that Lincoln Riley has that some of these other schools don't have, I would argue maybe Wisconsin does have the same problem with Luke Fickell, but some of these programs, like we talk about like Nebraska and Rutgers. If Nebraska and Rutgers take the next step next year, which in my opinion would be like going like 8-4, would be like the next step for a program like those two programs, Rutgers fans are going to be ecstatic with that.
Mm-hmm.
And even Nebraska fans are going to be like, well, we're getting there. We're getting there. If USC goes 8-4 next year, that's not going to help him. That's not going to be like, oh, we're good now. We're got it going back in the right direction. It's going to be unacceptable still there. And he is still going to be on the hot seat.
Yes.
He goes 8-4 next year. Whereas a lot of these other programs, if UCLA goes 8-4 next year, they're going to be loving the Deshaun Foster era.
Case, like a quick point that I would like to make, like just using your example of like next year in terms of where you were with like the 8-4. Let's look at Illinois. Look at what the year that they've had. Now, okay, I'm sure Greg Schiano is just, okay, like what, I can't believe I did that. But my point being is that Bielema knows, all right, this is what I like to do. I like to have a physical running game. I like to play. Traditionally, Illinois, I'm not saying that they're the best, but that, in terms of their physical style of defense, and they know who they are. And now if you're Illinois, think about it. I freely admit, I was looking at Illinois prior to this season. Okay, we're talking about these teams, like if they can get to 6. Now, Illinois, you're going to be playing Northwestern, rightfully going to be favored. If you go 9-3, I mean, that is a hell of a season for Illinois. I'm not trying to say that should be like, that you should be perfectly content and that you shouldn't, try to strive for even better. But I'm just saying that Illinois, for the first year in this expanded Big Ten, to go 9-3, that's tremendous. So to your point, like USC, they came into this, I think they were kind of thinking they were going to be in the Oregon tier. Like they were going to be up there, like competing for the Big Ten championship right off the bat. They're not even close to where Oregon is or Ohio State is in terms of the physical style of play that you need to have to be successful within the Big Ten.
Yeah, they've got. I don't know. I don't know how this works. We'll see. We'll see if he gets it turned around. But again, you've got all these other programs that they're mixed in with right now who can have the patience, I guess, right now with their current situations to kind of take the baby steps up the ladder here. And again, if they go 8-4 next year, that no one's going to care. That's still going to be a total failure. And quite frankly, if you're looking at their roster right now, are they going to go 8-4 next year? Like, are they going to even do that? Because I think their schedule is harder next year in terms of their in-conference play.
I agree with
Like
you.
Ohio State goes out there, right, next year? I think Ohio State's
No,
out there next, or is it?
I
2
don't think
years?
it's 2 years. It's 2
2
years.
Okay.
But to your point, I think it doesn't get easier. I mean, it is comical that, and again, because it's Michigan week, I remember a tweet that went around, a USC fan, kind of like to a Michigan fan, like, can't wait to play you in September, and and we're gonna be we'll probably play each other for the Big Ten championship or something along those lines. And I was thinking, okay, I was always of the belief that Michigan, this is going to be a step back. I didn't think it would be this dramatic, but I thought it would be a step back. And USC, I certainly did not anticipate their collapses that they've had in the fourth quarter of games. So I agree with you. I think USC, it's going to be a very difficult offseason, because without having the 2025 schedule in front of me, and let's face it, when that is released, I'm of the theory that it's not only who you play, but when you play them. Because the cumulative effect of, if you're playing against real physical teams, all right, when we talk about trap games, sometimes that's kind of where it is all right, this team that you never thought that you were going to lose to, well, after they played team A, team B that are very physical, maybe you're psychologically and physically worn down. You never know. I think USC, they could be in for a really rough 2025.
Yeah, and just looking now, it's Oregon. They're at Oregon.
Okay.
They're at Nebraska.
Okay.
Which won't be easy. That'll be a better Nebraska team. That's a tough place to play. Iowa comes in. That's, especially with USC's basically their lack of physicality, is going to be an interesting one. Michigan comes in. You're going to get Michigan State coming in. We'll see how they are in year two. But you've got Iowa, Iowa, Michigan, at Oregon, at Nebraska. That's okay. And so you're at Illinois, and which look, Bielema has got them. This is not going to get super. And then it gets even worse. If you don't make a big leap next year, 2026 on the schedule, you've got home games against Ohio State, Oregon, and Washington, and you've got road games at Penn State and Wisconsin, the two of the three toughest places to play in the league. And you've got a road game against Indiana and in Cignetti's third year at Indiana. So what does that look like? I mean, this is not going to you've got to figure out a way to get to 10 wins real soon, or that buyout's going to keep going down. And the bean counters there at USC are going to be well, can we do it now? Can we do it now? So this is going to be a tough fix, I think.
Oh, I was just listening to you rattle off the 2025. I was sitting there thinking, okay, using Marc's 8-4 barometer, I honestly, it's to me, it sounded to me like 8-4 might be a tough number to get to. And again, that's without the benefit of transfer portal additions and subtractions, and as well as the fact that, I mean, I know that with recruiting, Ohio State, they had the benefit of, Jeremiah Smith coming in, making an instant impact. But my point is that how often is it where you have an interior offensive or defensive line come in as a true freshman and be dominant? It's not. It's not. I mean, Orlando Pace, it was a generational type player. But my point being is USC, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't have anyone like that in their recruiting pipeline. So it could be a very rough next couple of years for USC, depending on how things shake out.
And at Notre Dame next year, by the way, too.
There you go. That's mid-October.
In October. So it's not even beginning of the year. You're going to be sandwiching that right in the middle of your Big Ten schedule. So going to be interesting. We will see. Big one for them, though, on Saturday. We will have all the preview action here. We'll have that up. I'll try it up Wednesday night. Wednesday or Thursday, or so either Wednesday night, or you guys can watch it after you sit down on the couch after your third plate at Thanksgiving and fire up the Big Ten preview for Week 14 coming up. So we'll get that up here midweek. But just want to go over some of the big storylines from the weekend. I think we've covered the biggest ones. Appreciate everyone watching and listening. Thanks again, Chip, for joining me. And again, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.